Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for open and liberal minds. Because yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, as you know, every single week we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. Our brand business platform is based upon looking at people, places and opportunities, really diving into the ideas that shape the future, but also exponentially create a different path for all. Now, my next guest is somebody who you need to know more about. He's an investor in the applications of powerful emerging technologies. He believes that these technologies are transforming our world and, importantly, our place in it. It is our collective responsibility to shape our societal, financial, and environmental future. My guest has lectured at leading establishments including UCL and Wharton Business School, and he co-founded the Atari Token project to build a metaverse based on a new economic platform with Atari. The Ethereum founder and several gaming legends. He's a founding partner of an active innovation fund, Edenbase. My guest was appointed as an expert advising both the UK government and the European Commission, including during the crucial period following the 2007 financial crash. Without further ado, I'd like to invite my dear friend and now the person who's going to be teaching us a bit about these big technologies, Daniel. But before then, a quick note from my dear sponsors. If you want to find out more about the Global Indian series, by the way, well, it couldn't be easier. Simply come to the website, which is www.globalindianseries.com. There you can listen to this podcast and the entire repertoire of discussions so far.
Hi, this is Dharmesh Shingala, co-founder of Novus. At Novus, we believe technology leads the way for a meaningful change. We are on a mission to change the way corporations, governments, and institutions interact with information. Same as the Global Indian podcast, help people transform for a better future. Find out more on how we are inspiring global change, either at the Global Indian Series website or Novus website to learn more about our innovative software solutions. From our family to yours, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Divya and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Now, after our phone call that we had over a week ago, we had a discussion. You ran me through the ideas of AI that we are going to discuss. It is obviously a very hot topic, but as mentioned, it was a very sombering moment in my life because you start to think a bit more about, well, we talk about the human experience. We talk about the human experience behind business, the ideas of states, the whole ideas of national identity. But there's something that you mentioned just now and something that's been mentioned by another incredible mind, Dr. Hinton, which is saying that AI is probably far more concerning now than even the ideas of climate change. And I think that there's been a lot of misunderstanding about the future role of technology. So without going down the lines of the likes of Terminator or our collective consciousness of movies of the past, Daniel, what are our biggest misconceptions that we have about emerging technologies, and especially right now of AI, when we hear statements from the likes of Elon Musk saying we collectively need to take a 6-month sabbatical because AI tech is becoming far more superior than we ever thought it would be?
Yes, thanks for that. It's a great question and enormously deep, and you can only scratch the surface in an answer. I mean, what Elon Musk suggests is clearly not possible. I mean, that's the first thing, and that's really important. We can't take a 6-month sabbatical. And that's part of the problem. Everybody is hanging their hat at the moment on AI. Last year it was the metaverse. The year before that it was blockchain. You know, there are these technologies, and there are we list 6 of them, which are AI, blockchain and tokenization, AR, VR, which is immersive technologies. There is additive manufacturing, which is 3D, 4D printing. There is always-on communications, which is understood in terms of its power in combination with the others, and there's quantum computing. And we're going through a phase at the moment where these technologies are becoming general purpose. And what that means is people are able to use them that are not experts, domain experts in their field. And these technologies are behavioral. It's not Industrial Revolution 4.0, which is what the WEF call it and various leaders. And I think that's an enormous misconception. And the reason that's an enormous misconception is it gives people the comfort and confidence and trying to find answers for a technology or a set of technology changes that are impacting our physicality. You know, the Industrial Revolution started in 1780, became very big in the 1850s, and it was all about replicating and then bettering our physical skills, you know. And we did very well out of it, you know, in the West. We had, you know, most people were employed in farms. Now they're employed in offices. The life is much safer. So we did extremely well. Horses, on the other hand, did terribly. So there were over 20 million horses in the US in the beginning. In 1900, there were now about 4 million. So, you know, complete elimination of the horse because they had nowhere else to go. And the first misconception is, therefore, that this is cognitive revolution. This is about mimicking our brains. And that's something very different. We've moved from physical to brains. What is human next? The other misconception, I think, with these is they don't have to be human. We don't know what being human is. If you ask a religious leader, a rabbi, or a priest or whatever, from all cultures, you will get some different answer about soul and spirit, etc. But, you know, and if you ask an atheist, you will get something completely different. But what is being human? But these machines don't have to be human. They just have to do what we do better than we do in single domains to cause enormous disruption. So, for instance, if they are a better accountant or lawyer or management consultant or driver, that eliminates all those functions that we currently do. And Elon Musk calling for a 6-month sabbatical is not going to happen because there will be somebody that won't stop. Because if they can replace all their lawyers and they only need 5 as opposed to 500 in their firm, then capitalism requires that happens. The regulations can try and stop it. But in a globalized world, that's very difficult. The third misconception, I think, which is really important, is that unlike, say, climate change, and I would argue, and I did argue in the first version of this book that I wrote in 2020 that's coming out now, I think this is a great threat in climate change. And the reason is climate change impacts us all. But the people that control these technologies do better than the people that don't control these technologies. So they are competitive. If China spews out enormous quantities of CO2, it's going to impact itself as much as it's going to impact Europe and the US and Africa and Asia. If China has a lead in these technologies or companies have leads in these technologies, then they're going to do phenomenally better than others. And I think when you combine all those three together, you've got an enormous disruption that is likely to happen. The final thing that I think is really interesting about these technologies is what they're allowing. So historically, and I mean historically, 10 years ago, Silicon Valley, London, Paris, New York were the great places to open companies because the most capital was there, the most universities, the most knowledge centers, etc. With these technologies, you're much more likely to be able to open a business anywhere. And do it yourself because you don't need the coding skills, you don't need the enormous teams. And I think we're reaching the stage where 4 bright guys or girls can set up a company using AI and these frontier technologies and being frontier technology first, start competing from anywhere in the world with global companies. And I think that means that the next 10, 15 years are going to be incredibly exciting.
It's quite noticeable that the way that you speak about AI and the way that technology is moving forward, that it isn't doom and gloom. You know, if we look at anything to do with the news right now, it seems that there's statements of do not have kids, the future will be ending. It's almost that the 4 horsemen will be walking down the city center of London anytime soon because we've unleashed this superpower of technology that's going to wipe humanity off the target. How much of that then is just really building up almost the mustard around AI in order to be able to sell technologies more effectively? Like, how realistic is this?
Well, the first thing is the media love to sell fear. I mean, that is the goal of the media. If people are scared,
What? Come on, Daniel.
If a front page of a paper says you're all going to die, people pick the paper up. If it says everybody's happy and the sun is shining, less people do it. So we have that going on. So that is a drive to this. No, I'm not doom and gloomy at all. I mean, there's a great quote I like to say, which is, "Hell is truth seen too late."
Yeah.
And we're at the beginning of this. You know, AI, as brilliant as it is just starting. And the technology isn't really that good in a lot of cases. I mean, it can do some really fantastic things. It can get a grade B in a Wharton MBA. It can pass the bar. It can do these things, which are really cool, but it's specifically, it can code really well, computer code, but it's built specifically for those things. But it's got a very long way to go. What I'm urging, and the reason I'm so hopeful, and the reason I built Edenbase, is the future with these technologies can be absolutely incredible for humanity. I mean, you know, we can reduce or reverse the damage that we've done since the Industrial Revolution. We can have a new form of capitalism. We can empower people around the world. We can have much more equality. We can have less need for pollution. We can enable people from their own homes to be able to immerse themselves in other cultures and communicate with people seamlessly in other cultures. Those are enormous benefits. We can reduce enormous population growth in certain parts of the world by reducing child mortality, etc. We can extend longevity. These are all phenomenal benefits. The danger is, of course, is if we don't act now and hope that somebody else is going to do this for us and stand up for our own desires and what we want from them, we're not going to get what we want. And one of the collective calls we have at Edenbase, and I have too, and the reason we have it at Edenbase is because one of my calls is, you know, saying we're going to build tech for good is, you know, Facebook was supposed to be the greatest force for humanity in the early 2010. Yeah. And today it's considered to have done enormous damage. I mean, it's done some positives too. But if you get involved at the beginning and you assess how these technologies are being delivered, and you have a community feeding in to how they're being developed and looking at them and challenging them as they're being developed, the chances of that technology and the solution and use of the technology is more likely to be accommodating for more views and more people. You know, one of the things about me, I look very, very English. I went to an English public school. I sound extremely English, but actually my father's Jewish, fled from Austria when he was 4, and my mother is German. The people that he fled from. And so, you know, when I grew up, I had this enormous dichotomy of views, which was, you know, my mother's family, who I stayed with in Germany, were the people that killed my father's family. And, you know, that I think has given me this slightly better ability to consider different sides, but I cannot put myself in the shoes of somebody else. So if someone comes to me and says, how do you mention the metaverse product? If they come to me and says, how do you make a metaverse better for me? My answer to them is, you tell me. I can't tell you because I don't know what your desires are and your needs are. I can guess what they are, but I'm likely to get it wrong. And therefore, the benefits of these technologies will be enormous if everybody starts taking an interest. And those interests could be very small.
But, what is the implication for small state governments, though? Because we have many political leaders that tune in every week, as well as many people in emerging markets. They hear of AI. They hear of how the world has changed. Democracies have been built up. But now, all of a sudden, if you're not catching up to that space and you're not in control, and I think that is a big word here, if you're not in control of your own technology, ultimately somebody else is going to be in control of you. What are some of the dangers for emerging markets, for example, or small state economies that don't necessarily have want the financial inputs to be able to invest heavily into this technology, and secondly, have limited understanding about what this could do for their own democracies?
Well, these questions are really difficult. And one of the things I say in my book actually is we don't provide the answers because it's very difficult for us to provide the answers, but also our answers come with bias. But there are generic things. Clearly, my belief is the AI technologies are likely to be more positively impactful for developing nations than they are for the developed world, because the type of jobs and the employment they're going through and the cost effectiveness are likely to be beneficial. It's a bit like the mobile phone networks. The mobile phone networks in developing nations are much more advanced relatively to the ones in the developed nations because we didn't have fixed lines, etc. And they didn't. These technologies have enormous benefits for where medical systems aren't entrenched. So, in the UK, we have the NHS. The NHS resists technological advancement because it's not necessarily the benefit of everybody that works there. Whereas in developing nations, to be able to use technology that can identify and help resolve diseases is likely to be more quickly adopted. And I think that's very, very beneficial. But you say a very important thing, and my book is called Unsupervised because it's saying there are a bunch of people that are controlling this technology. I remember in my first version in 2020, I put Sam Altman as the 5th most powerful person in the space. And all my friends who read it in 2020 said, "Who on earth is Sam Altman?" I said, and my co-author, who I eventually had to get it ready for publishing, he said, "I don't think Sam Altman should be there." This was 18 months ago. I said, Sam Altman has to be there. There's no one not talking about Sam Altman now. He's the OpenAI founder and controller. He controls the way this technology is delivered. And yes, so it's relatively beneficial for those who have it. But again, leaders in countries that don't have the infrastructure and the inertia drag of existing technologies, existing industries can actually adopt this very, very fast. And for instance, you could now, someone in India, for instance, in a rural town can use ChatGPT and OpenAI to write a business plan, have it translated into English, turn it into a deck, and translate his oral video, and write the code for a piece of technology that solves a solution that he has that might be very, very useful, rather than waiting for it to come out of Silicon Valley, eventually arriving at him, and he not being able to use it because it doesn't meet his requirements or her requirements. And I think that is phenomenal. Actually, in my book, the most powerful person I say in this technology is a young woman called Amaka from Africa who does exactly that. And she's the person that's going to be the future, technology, number one. But my point is, we are at this incredible stage where anybody can build or is starting to be able to build anything. And I find that really fascinating.
One thing that's quite interesting about you is that you're saying you can't just look at AI by itself. These are cluster technologies. When you start combining different technological advancements together, that's where it gets really exciting. That's where it gets really interesting, the implementations upon that. What are some of the areas that you're seeing convergence of tech coming into?
Well, as I said, there are these number of technologies, and I look at them at the moment, I look at them as a pyramid, which is AI is the top, particularly because that's sort of brain. And what is AI? AI is just writing. I mean, it's a very broad area. It's writing a program that mimics a brain function. I mean, that's a definition. Below that are two very powerful technologies. One's called quantum computing, which doesn't quite exist yet, but is almost there. It's going to be very binary. It'll be there. It won't. It's a bit like it's like in a PC in the 60s. It can't do a great deal, but it suddenly will. Below that is blockchain and tokenization, which is sort of misunderstood as well. And below that are these additive manufacturing, AR, VR. and always on comms. When you start merging, if you can merge, for instance, quantum computing, AI, and always on communications, your mobile phone, which is already, I mean, I love my mobile phone when I look at it, that in terms of miniaturization and dematerialization in the, 20 years ago, that was your library, it was your torch, it was your radio, it was, your compass, it was your map, it was everything it was enormous. It's all down to that. If you then say always on communication, 5G, 6G, that mobile phone no longer needs to have a screen or a battery because it could be inserted as a contact lens, which means suddenly everybody is enabled with a contact lens. So they're always able to look around. If you add AI and quantum to that, quantum is really good at matching. So I could walk into a room and it could scan everybody's faces there, look them up on LinkedIn or a database. It could then match and say, if I talk to Rajan and Satesh, who I don't know, and mention this to them, then the three of us are likely to do a deal. Or I'm a single person and I walk into a bar and it says, this person is the most likely person to have a relationship with you because I've looked at their friends and I've looked at this and I've looked at that. Those type of things, when you merge them together, are phenomenally powerful, and those are the type of things that I see coming over the horizon, and the world will be really very good.
How far is this horizon? How far off are we?
Well, quantum computing, somewhere between 3 and 10 years, we're going to be able to have some really powerful quantum computers. Quantum computing, of all the technologies, I think is the most powerful and also worrying. I think general purpose quantum, which is a machine like your Mac that you can program on, is 20 years away. But machines that can start doing quantum processing, probably 3 years away. When I met someone at the NSA and the US Air Force in November last year, who said we're now 2023 is the reset year for it because it's going to come out sooner than they're going to be able to fix the problems that quantum can cause.
So what are the dangers of quantum computing then?
Well, the most famous danger that everybody thinks about is actually the ability to crack the code that protects all our communications and banking systems. So theoretically, it can do that. So when you have a quantum computer that can break the codes, it can just crack every communication. It means that any data that you've captured, and you can capture any data because it's sent encrypted across open communication. So if I'm a government, and I suspect most governments are doing this, are capturing all the data that's sent. As soon as they've got a quantum computer, they can open it and see every bit of data they've captured. That is considered the most. The more powerful part of it is the fact that it does computations really in a completely different way. So a normal binary computer, we uses yes and no's, ones and zeros. So to do route planning or finding drugs, etc., pharmaceutical drugs, it has to do it one by one by one. A quantum computer does it all at once because it uses it has its state of 1 and 0 at exactly the same time, so it does instant matching. The ability to instantly match data if you're an authoritarian regime and look at all your people, all your citizens, and match everything together and say, well, I know this person does this, so I know that person does that, and that person does that, starts to become very scary. The benefits of quantum, because if we've got to always look at the benefits too, is they can, as I said, drug discovery is awesome, route planning is awesome, the ability to map human genomes to data match is phenomenal. So for instance, microfinance, if I had a quantum that could take in lots of data about lots and lots of people and say, well, Daniel has a bit of money at the end of the month and Rajan has it a week later, I can start providing microfinance to this set of people by matching all that information together. Those are the sort of real benefits of that technology.
So the basis point of many of this technology is on the reliance of individuals to upload information data points. It's also on people to help program the ideas. Now, the question that comes into here that I think governs things like AI and even quantum computing is the idea of morality. What is right? What is wrong? Now, computing is quite interesting because all of a sudden now that whole idea is really brought down out of the mystical beings and into the world of saying, well, why don't we use logic and reason? Is there danger to that? Is the danger really based upon people feeling a bit more obsolete than ever before? Because if you have a brain that can compute information far quicker and process information at a speed that is beyond any individual's capability and send that out there to over 10,000 other machines that are learning at the same speed, isn't the danger more about us feeling less validated as people?
Well, that's the crux of this. You've really got to the crux of the problem, which is, if we're being very crude about humanity, pre-industrial revolution, most countries were totalitarian.
Yeah.
They had a king or a ruler, they had a very small upper class or governing class, and no one else mattered. What happened with there are certain religions around the world that had a much more ecumenical view on life, and smaller area tribes, etc., were much better in terms of the way they saw people. But in terms of these, even in Europe, you had these very, very top, very small top and very wide bottom. The reason for that is they didn't see the value of other people. They only saw the value of themselves, because people were just machines to them. They just plowed the field or cooked the food or whatever. What the Industrial Revolution did, certainly in the West, and I think this had a big impact, more than a lot of religions, sadly, but the capitalist society suddenly made people valuable because it was their brains that were being used, and you couldn't replicate their brains and control them as easily as you could their physical bodies. So what you had in the West is you had democracies, very effective democracies, and those democracies, they had their flaws, but certainly most people would have preferred to live in a democracy than not a democracy.
Absolutely.
But what you've been seeing recently is those democracies are actually moving back towards centralized small government. The parties tend to have the same views. People are in politics for their entire lives. It doesn't matter what party they are. They're on just as many influential bodies. If they mess up, they get promoted. In the UK, they go to the House of Lords. It's like, or get another job. So we're moving to that sort of that area as well. As you say, if these technologies make people not just feel obsolete, but other people feel they're obsolete, what happens? Yeah. And I don't know what happens, but I worry. I worry very badly that outcome is not good. And that outcome is not good for one of two reasons. One, the people that feel obsolete start reacting very badly. And actually, most revolutions don't come from the workers, they come from the middle class. The Russian Revolution, all these came from the middle echelon. So if enormous numbers of professionals start losing their jobs and can't feed their family properly and lose all their status, what happens? Or what happens when certain people, the controllers of these technologies, be they, the powerful tech titans or the governments or the supranational organizations, once they start losing connection with the people, there's a talk I went to just before lockdown with the ex-chief rabbi of the UK, and he was talking something about I call it the Joseph principle, but he said about Joseph, he said the interesting thing that he wanted to raise about the story of Joseph is his brothers sold him into slavery. But the text says very clearly that when they sold him into slavery, they moved away from him. They weren't with him when they sold him. And the reason they make that so clear is it's very easy to do something to people when you lose that connection with them, even if it's your brother. And what they're trying to say is if they'd been with him, next to him, there was no way they could sell him into slavery. And humans, we have a lot of learning from our history. We're fundamentally the same people, but I just worry what happens when we start, as you say, losing our value and we lose connection with other people. And we see that on Twitter. You know, when I started using Twitter, I'd say a comment, and people would start writing the most awful stuff, and I would respond awfully. And I realized what was the point. And then I started responding saying, thanks for your message. I don't understand why you got so upset. You know, I don't think you understood what I said. And maybe we have a different opinion. And a few of those people, we started following each other afterwards. So actually, if you take a step back and say, well, this person is misunderstanding, I have a connection with them. But actually, social media and all these technologies and more importantly, they're behaviorally changing us to ensure that we get triggered. Because as we said, fear sells. If I get upset on Twitter, then I'm likely to spend more time on Twitter than if I read a nice message saying, oh, it's going to be a lovely day outside, then I'm going to go outside and leave Twitter. So this whole thing is very accelerating and very dangerous. So I think you hit such an important point with that.
And I think that's the issue, isn't it? It's the whole idea of the human experience. We're looking at AI, and one thing I'm learning from this conversation here, that don't just look at AI or technology in the sense of what can it do, but really question, how does it shape human behavior? How does it shape the human experience? And how does it challenge the governing of the human experience? Those people who have placed themselves in those positions that ultimately this technology does challenge head on, which is a fascinating place to be. Daniel, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know that this is the first of many more conversations around this subject, and also having a look at the future where technology is going to be leading us in. What are the final thoughts that you want to leave with our audience, and how can they find out more about the Eden Project?
Okay, so my final thoughts are humans are very adaptable, and we're also incredible. You know, and everybody is quite an incredible, unique individual. And there is no, in my opinion, cause for enormous alarm today. There might be in 5 years' time, but there isn't today. What you should be is you should be worried about the future and that it doesn't meet what you need from it. And these technologies can deliver a beneficial future. So the best way of dealing with that is to learn a little bit about these technologies. You know, the more, if you know something, firstly, they're less scary. Secondly, you put yourself in a position to be able to use them. And thirdly, you allow an environment in which you are involved in the process. And that take small steps. As you said, you give all your data to these companies. You know, what data are you giving up? Realize what they're tracking. Try and deal with it. The second thing is, if you've got some influence, you know, use that influence, you know, to really start shaping these technologies and thinking what the answers are. There are an enormous number of ethical problems. There are an enormous number of challenges with these. But if you go in with the expectation that the result is going to be positive, then the result is likely to be positive. And so I run a business, Eden Base. We invest in companies. We invest in companies that are going to deliver disruptive change based on the changes that we're going through with these technologies. We do it through a community. So we love people to join our community, either as an LP, investing money in us, being an advisor to companies, sending companies that we should be investing in, providing knowledge to us. And that knowledge is not just, this is how AI works, this is how quantum works, which is something we do, but how does it impact the type of things that I'm going through? How does it impact healthcare in India? How does it impact, you know, democracy in South Africa? Those are the data points that are really, really important. And the final thing is, these technologies are inevitable. You can't stop them. You can't, even Elon Musk can't draw, you know, King Canute understood he couldn't bring the tide in. These technologies have competitive advantage to those that are wielding them. A lot of people that were on the letter that Elon Musk signed actually are competitive. They were worried about other companies getting a head start on them and wanted 6 months for their own technology to catch up. You know, you've got to realize that this is not, technology is often a winner takes all. We haven't got the in this case we can't allow the winner to take all. One of the things I think is great about the UK, and as I mentioned, I'm a first generation Brit, is the UK is a leader in early stage human rights with the Magna Carta. It's got a great rule of law. It's got a stable government. It speaks English. And one of the things I called for the British government to do is to set up the sort of UN of this technology within the UK. We don't have a UN for those sort of things.
Nope.
It's a bit like the International Atomic Agency. We shouldn't be limiting, but unlike weapons, we shouldn't be limiting, as you said. People in developing nations should have access to this even faster, potentially, than Western nations, and can use it better.
It's an interesting idea, because it's saying, how do you govern it? I know that many governments have tried to put things in place, but I think that's where the fear is for governments, because ultimately this is online. It's machine learning. It's something that is not... How do you even put a law in place that allows from technology use on one side of the world to be utilized on my system here? It's becoming increasingly difficult to govern. There is the key issue for governments. Where does my taxation come in from this whole modeling? But do you know what? It is good. You've got a website. You've got the book that is now launched as well, and it's on Amazon, from what I believe. So we'll put a link there. Daniel, thanks for coming on the show. I think this is the first of many more discussions to come on.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and have a wonderful day.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.